New tariff by China is almost like an act of declaration of war against the United States. And what I'd like to see Trump do, and I know they're thinking of different strategies about how to move forward, is really aim these tariffs at the villain of the world, which is China.
Chinese business model and the economy are the most unbalanced, imbalanced in the history of the modern world. We've never seen anything like this in terms of their export level relative to their GDP, relative to their population.
China has hit back, and Trump is calling it a declaration of war, trade war in this sense, but tensions are bound to only go up from here. So let's go over exactly what China did and how US is responding. Starting with the initial tariff that Trump put on China. After all, CCP is the biggest cheat when it comes to world trade. While they're fighting to keep TikTok alive here in the United States, all American social media, including YouTube, is banned in China. That's not fair trade. This is exactly why Trump initially slapped the biggest tariff on the Chinese economy. Here are more details.
These blue bars show where we were before, what the state of tariffs were for US's trading partners. You can see he's already imposed tariffs on Mexico, on Canada, as well as on China. Some of those were rolled over from Trump's first presidency. And then he implemented this 10% baseline tariff on all exports, on all imports coming into the US. Donald Trump said he wanted to look into the US's trading relationship with individual countries and impose something he called a reciprocal tariff, effectively looking at the tariffs those countries impose, saying if you do it to us, we're going to do it to you, but also looking at other impediments to trade. So, for example, regulations that might block US exports. And when we tot all of that up, and you can see that they're stacking, by the way, so that these tariffs sit on top of each one. And then suddenly, when those reciprocal tariffs are applied, well, those bars shoot up, particularly painful, as you can see, for countries like China, which has been hit with a 34% reciprocal tariff, but that sits on top of all the other tariffs, meaning actually, accumulatively, the tariff on China is over 50%, and that is massive, really significant. And other countries as well. So Vietnam, a Southeast Asian exporting powerhouse, has been hit with that 46% reciprocal tariff, taking the total tariff closer to 60%.
Now, it wasn't just this. We have to remember, Trump put on tariffs in his first administration, then Biden put on more tariffs on China, and these new tariffs are on top of all that. Before moving forward, if you guys can please hit that subscribe button down below to keep up with all the geopolitical news like this one. Let's begin. So we'll get to the total number in just a second, but before that, I want to show you guys this chart that Trump administration published. As you can see in this chart, it says Taiwan is a country, and clearly CCP was not happy about this. But they didn't have a lot of time to respond to this because the tariffs that China got. So here are more details on all the tariffs China has as of right now. This could probably go up because China retaliated already, and now Trump is likely gonna increase his tariffs. So originally China had anywhere from 7.5% to 25% tariff from Section 301. In essence, these are the tariffs Trump put on in his first administration, and then President Biden increased it when he took office. So these were all already there before Trump took office on January 28th this year. Then earlier this year, he put a 20% tariff on China because of the fentanyl trade. Then he put on a 34% tariff just this week because of the reciprocity. This is basically China doesn't open up their market and China has tariffs on US products that go into the Chinese country. Now on top of that, China buys Venezuelan oil. And Trump recently announced that any country that deals with Venezuela, does business with them, they'll have an extra 25% tariff on it. Now this is something that Trump called secondary tariffs, basically punishing countries that are working with our enemies. This is something Trump has also said he'll slap on Iran if it doesn't come to the nuclear table. And he has also told Russia that if it doesn't agree to peace, this is something they can get slapped on. The goal of these tariffs is not to target the country that's misbehaving, but rather its allies. So that's why even though we're trying to punish Venezuela for basically breaking human norm, we are putting a 25% tariff on China because China buys a lot of Venezuelan oil. They also buy 90% of the oil that Iran sells. So if Iran doesn't come to the negotiating table, China can expect more tariffs. But as of right now, before all that goes into effect, China already has more than 100% tariffs on its products. Right when all this was announced, China started panicking, and this is what Chinese Foreign Ministry posted. This is from the official account. They're basically making TikTok responding to Trump's tariffs. Here it is.
This is our globe. An imperfect world. There is violence, hegemonism, greed, exploitation, subversion, surveillance, backstabbing, suppression, provocation, tariffs. Do you want to live in a world like this? Or a world like this? No war. Security for all. Equality among nations. Justice. Shared prosperity. Barriers transformed into bridges. Opportunity for all. Civilizations coexisting in harmony. Global solidarity. Together, we can make our world a better place.
Now, it wasn't just TikToks that was China's response. Eventually, CCP did get around to slapping retaliatory tariffs on US, and they put a 34% tariff, the same number that Trump initially put on China. Here's more details on this tariff.
So this just came across, guys. So China officially has retaliated. You know, when you put the fentanyl penalty along with the tariffs issued yesterday, we have tariffed China over 50%. They have just responded. They don't want to be bullied, air quotes. They with a 34% tariffs. They also listed 11 American companies of so-called unreliable entities, and they're going to halt chicken imports too. Listen, we get a lot more from them than they get from us. Yeah, and drone companies, which a lot of it's going to hurt the defense industry too, because a lot of the parts that we use, sadly and astoundingly, that our Pentagon uses are from parts and materials that we get from China. So this is a big wake-up call. The other big story is pharmaceuticals are going to be targeted as early as today. Why? Remember, we don't make any drugs here, but yet we use them all. So how do you bring manufacturing back? Well, if you're in Ireland, there's no reason to come here. It's at 0%. But now we're going to start bringing it back as tariffs hit. Lastly, about China, it looks like we're going to tariff third parties that buy Venezuelan oil. Guess who buys Venezuelan oil? China.
Now, we have criticized the tariff policy where we think criticism is warranted, but China is one place where we should have been doing this a lot earlier, and their response is a perfect example of this. They're blocking stuff that Pentagon needs, that Defense Department needs to build up our defenses. And the whole point of doing this now instead of when there is a war is that we'll be prepared when there is a war. Because if we had waited until there was a war over Taiwan and China just blocks all these exports that we depend on China for, we wouldn't have any backup. We wouldn't have a way to make drones in the United States. We wouldn't have a way to get rare earth elements from other countries or maybe inside United States. We wouldn't have all these other options if we were just waiting until the last second to prepare for this kind of stuff. But for China, this retaliation is not smart because we export around $150 billion worth of stuff to China, okay? While China exports around $500 billion worth of stuff to the United States. At the end of the day, we have more stuff that's coming to the United States from China that we can tariff than China has. So they're trying to get in this battle of tariffing back and forth, and at the end of the day, we have 3 times more stuff that China sends us. So we have 3 times more leverage to tariff more stuff against China. And on top of that, Chinese economy is already struggling. They have the real estate crisis that we've been covering for the last few years, and on top of that, they have a deflationary spiral going on in their economy, which means the only way they could survive is by exporting all this extra production that they're doing to other countries. If they cannot export to the United States, their biggest trading partner, their biggest export market, their economy is in a lot more trouble than the US economy. Here we have Secretary of Treasury Scott Bessent. Now, many people would like to say that this plan is Trump plan. In reality, if you start looking behind the curtain, this plan actually originated from Scott Bessent and Stephen Miran. These are the 2 economic advisors behind the scenes, and of course Scott Bessent is the Secretary of Treasury. These are the people who really came up with this plan, and here we have a statement straight from him explaining why China cannot afford to get into a retaliation battle with the United States, or I guess a tariff war with the United States, and explaining just more of a thought process behind why we need to do this when it relates to China right now. So let's listen.
We are the debtor nation.
Yes.
We have the trade deficits. The surplus nation is in the weaker position because the Chinese business model, and Tucker, by the way, the Chinese business model and the economy are the most unbalanced, imbalanced in the history of the modern world. We've never seen anything like this in terms of their export level relative to their GDP, relative to their population. So I think it is going to be very difficult for them to try to change the model. They're in a deflationary recession / depression right now. They're trying to export their way out of it, and we can't let them do that. But I think that when you think the Chinese manufacturing system is like that old Disney movie with the brooms carrying the buckets.
Yeah.
There's nothing you can do. Like, that's their business model. It's not going to stop.
Now, you can agree with the reciprocity of the tariff plan that Trump introduced against 180 nations or disagree with it. But with China, we needed to do this, and it's a great time to do it right now because Chinese economy needs us way more than we need them. Now, after China announced their retaliatory tariffs, Trump also put out 2 statements, so let's go through them one by one. First, he responded right away, it seems like right when the 34% Chinese tariffs were announced, and this is what he said. China played it wrong. They panicked. The one thing they cannot afford to do. After this, he had more of a lengthy statement, and this is what he said. China has been hit much harder than the USA. Not even close. They and many other nations have treated us unsustainably badly. We have been dumb and helpless, whipping post, but not anymore. Not any longer. We are bringing back jobs, businesses, and like never before. Already more than $5 trillion of investment and rising fast. This is an economic revolution. We'll win. Hang tough. It won't be easy, but the end result will be historic. We'll make America great again. I'm hoping this means that we're gonna have more retaliatory tariff on China because they responded. Because just from the statements that the administration and people from the administration have been making on social media and even on news channels, it seems the goal of the tariffs is not really to have the other country cut their tariffs down. Instead, it seems the main goal is to have the factories from other countries move into the United States. And that means the tariffs will just keep going up, at least I get that feeling, until businesses start announcing that factories come back here. Now, of course, that's up for debate if that's a good way to deal with allies like people like the countries in Europe and countries in North America. But with China, we needed to do that because we are way too dependent on a country that we may be going to war in just a few years. Now, another shocking turn of events that happened because of the tariff announcement that Trump carried out was that apparently TikTok's sale was approved. A US company, it seems Oracle, was ready to buy TikTok and the deal was approved by the CCP. But unfortunately, when Trump announced the tariffs, CCP balked and they pulled out of the deal. Now, important context to remember here is that we already had a law in place that was passed by Congress, signed by President Biden, that would force TikTok to sell to a US company or get banned. When President Trump took office, he basically gave them a extension, 75 days extension, to find a seller or find a buyer. And then that 75 days was supposed to be ending on April the 5th, so yesterday. And apparently a deal was in place, as you can see from this reporting here from Bloomberg. After months of negotiations, US officials were close to an accord Wednesday that would launch a new US-based version of TikTok, owned and operated by a majority of American investors, according to a person who was involved in the deal. The proposal called for reducing ByteDance holding below 20% to comply with the US law requiring Beijing-based company to divest its TikTok stake or see the app banned in US. White House officials had planned for Trump to sign an executive order approving the proposal, which had the blessing of investors and ByteDance, and opening a 120-day window to complete the transaction. The announcement would have came April the 5th, so last night, to avoid a TikTok ban. Unfortunately, once the tariffs were announced on Thursday, it seems that CCP backed out of this deal and basically said, hey, unless the tariffs are lifted, we will not be approving the sale of TikTok. Now, this is where I do have some bad news. Trump did put out a statement saying that he has given TikTok another 75 days to figure out a sale. This was his statement. My administration has been working very hard on a deal to save TikTok, and we have made tremendous progress. The deal requires more time to ensure all necessary approvals are signed, which is why I'm signing an executive order to keep TikTok up and running for an additional 75 days. We hope to continue working in good faith with China, who I understand are not very happy with their reciprocal tariffs, necessary for fair and balanced trade between China and the USA. This proves that tariffs are the most powerful economic tool and very important to our national security. We do not want TikTok to go dark. We look forward to working with TikTok and China to close the deal. Thank you for your attention to this matter. Now, unfortunately, this executive order may be illegal because the law that was passed by Congress and signed by President Biden when he was in office says that President can only give them an extension for one time for 75 days. If they can't find a seller in that time, that means TikTok must be banned. And that's exactly what should have happened. Does this not go to say the whole reason we're trying to ban TikTok is CCP has too much influence over private companies in China? And this is a perfect example of the problem that everyone was pointing out. CCP is deciding if TikTok goes for sale or not. There are no private companies in China, and TikTok is just yet another example. And same thing with the ports in Panama. I know we haven't talked about that in a few weeks, but a US company had bought the ports from a Chinese company that was based out of Hong Kong. BlackRock bought both the ports. They paid $19 billion, if I'm remembering correctly. But all of a sudden, CCP was not happy with the sale that a private company in China carried out, so they have cancelled it. Here's the report on that. China delays $23 billion sale of Panama Canal ports, US-backed BlackRock. And why is CCP delaying it? Well, let's look at the exclusive report. Apparently, Chinese dictator Xi Jinping was very angry about the Hong Kong company selling the Panama Canal ports to US without consulting Beijing. Apparently, private companies cannot make decisions in China without getting Xi Jinping's approval. And that's exactly why they are banning it, because Xi wants to use the ports as a bargaining chip in negotiations with the Trump administration. So he didn't want the Chinese company to sell the port for $23 billion. By the way, that's an overvaluation of what the ports are worth. So that's why the Chinese company sold it so quickly, because they were getting a price for an asset they had that was much more than the asset was actually worth in the market. Again, yet another example of there are no private companies in China, everything is controlled by the CCP. The bigger you get, the more control CCP has over you. YouTube just dropped a mind-boggling announcement. It is paying creators $64 million per day. Why? Well, because YouTube doesn't have enough creators right now. That's why you see videos on your homepage that have less than 1,000 views, like this one. Now, of course, that doesn't mean everyone should start a channel. But if you have ever wondered about starting a YouTube channel or a faceless channel, now is the perfect time. YouTube is paying creators millions every single day, and it's pushing newer and smaller channels now more than ever. But I'm sure you have many questions on how to start and grow a channel. I get these questions in my email all the time from some of you guys. That's why we have decided to put all our YouTube advice into one training bootcamp for completely free. So if you're someone interested in starting your own YouTube channel, you can sign up for this bootcamp by clicking the link in the description or scanning the QR code on your screen. This bootcamp is like a Zoom call, so it is limited to 100 people at a time. So be sure to sign up before it gets full. Now back to the video.